My friends, if we learned something over those last couple of days and I think weeks by now, it's that some modern guitar players out there might have some difficulties with composing their own material, which is honestly quite sad to see, not just because all of the drama you already heard about, but also because writing licks and solos is one of my absolute favorite things to do. And the fun and creative aspect of it all makes it worth putting in all the practice time in the first place. But I do realize that a lot of players might be intimidated by more advanced sounds and maybe have trouble building some vocabulary outside of the usual same old boring stuff they usually tend to play. So what can you do about that? As we have seen, stealing from other players and just copying note by note is not a good idea, but there are actually some very helpful tips and tricks that I found over the last around 20 years of playing guitar. In fact, feel free to steal everything in this video, because I would like to turn this whole guitar drama week that we've been having on its head and hopefully do something positive with today's video, because a while ago I actually talked about some of my absolute favorite phrasing tricks of all time on my main YouTube channel. Sadly, almost nobody saw this video. It did not do very well, but it has some great and super helpful information in there, because you will not just learn those licks and copy them, you will understand how I'm actually applying all of those tricks and how they work, so that you can use them creatively for your next guitar solo. Alright, to show you how extremely powerful today's phrasing tricks actually are, I'd like to work with a very simple scale you're all familiar with. That's right, the good old A minor pentatonic scale in its most common position on the fretboard. And as you know, this scale is mostly associated with a sound like this. And of course, there's nothing wrong with the good old traditional blues and rock kind of guitar licks. But if you want to sound a bit more advanced and original right away, while still using this kind of basic framework, I highly suggest working with chromatic ornamentation. That sounds quite fancy, but don't worry, it's actually quite easy. The really awesome concept behind this is just visualizing the chromatic notes that are surrounding all of your scale notes. So you're not just exclusively thinking in the chromatic scale or exclusively in the pentatonic scale. I'm just visualizing the surrounding chromatic notes of every single note in the pentatonic scale. So when I'm playing C right here on the 8th fret on the high E string, I can also see the surrounding chromatic notes C sharp or D flat and B, so 1/2 step above and 1 step below the note that I'm playing. Or when I'm playing A right here on the 5th fret on the high E string, I can also see the surrounding chromatic notes B flat or A sharp and A flat or G sharp. So in the context of the A minor pentatonic scale, those are completely wrong and terrible notes. If you land on them, it's not gonna sound too great. That does sound pretty crazy, but if you actually always resolve back into the actual note that you should be playing in the scale, you will be very surprised, because you're actually getting away with playing all of these completely wrong notes. So although I was playing lots of wrong notes right now, you could still hear that harmonic framework of the A minor pentatonic scale. This is a really cool trick and really easy shortcut to immediately get that kind of jazz fusion style element into your playing. This is actually often referred to as outside playing. So you're essentially playing totally wrong notes outside of the scale, but you're actually getting away with it because you're using a scale as the framework or as the skeleton, and you flesh it out with those chromatic ornamentations. As always, my friends, I made sure to upload some exercise video play-alongs, PDF tabs and guitar profiles for today's lesson on patreon.com/Bernd. This first chromatic ornamentation workout is especially helpful because it will allow you to add that really cool advanced fusion style sound to your licks right away. It's honestly really easy to do that, and it will come naturally as soon as you practiced a couple of days with the video play-alongs I made for you. Today's second phrasing trick is perfect for you in case you're a little bit bored with traditional string bending. The most common bends you will hear all over the place are half-tone and whole-tone bends. So here's the trick I want to show you today. Listen to this bend. So without any bragging, this was pretty much the biggest bend that you ever heard, right? Well, not exactly, it's actually a really easy trick. The more experienced players among you guys and girls definitely heard what was going on right here. I was essentially combining a slide with a bend on top. So I was performing a huge slide from D all the way to G right here. That's quite easy, you just have to pay attention to land on the right note. And then I was just playing a whole tone bend. That's also not that difficult, but what is actually difficult is combining the two things, so the slide and the bend. My biggest goal with this is creating the illusion that I'm actually bending the note from right here, which is quite impossible. So I don't want this to sound like a slide and then a bend. I really want to connect those two parts, so I have to bend a little bit earlier than that. Make sure to check out the exercise video play along that I made for this one on Patreon as well. With this workout you're actually combining 3 different pentatonic scale positions. So you're sliding away from the lowest note of the first position and you're bending all the way up to the highest note of the third position. That sounds pretty cool and quite impressive, and I really hope that you will use this trick in your next guitar solo. By the way, if you're into advanced phrasing and string bending, I showed you some other really awesome exercises a couple of weeks ago on the channel. As always, a lot of you guys and girls actually missed it because, say it with me, around 80% of you awesome people are still not subscribed to this channel yet. So join our awesome guitar community right now by clicking that little red button. This will greatly help you out with becoming a better guitar player every single week. So the third trick that you can use to make a simple framework like this more interesting is simply changing the harmonic structure of the scale that you're playing to your liking. So maybe you really like the 5-note system of the pentatonic scale as opposed to the 7 notes of the heptatonic scales. But you're not exactly satisfied with the kind of basic harmonic material that you're playing in the scale. So in our case, the root A, minor 3rd C, perfect 4th D, perfect 5th E, and minor 7th G. A really cool and easy trick to make this much more interesting immediately is just including the major 6th. So F sharp on the 7th fret on the B string, or in any other position on the fretboard. That major 6th is the characteristic interval of the Dorian mode. But instead of deciding between the A minor pentatonic scale and the A Dorian scale for your solo, you can just infuse your pentatonic scale with a Dorian flavor. I could play the root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 5th, and major 6th. This is still a 5-note scale and layout when you play it all across the fretboard, but this kind of pentatonic Dorian hybrid scale sounds much more interesting. And of course you can do that for any kind of scale or mode, like harmonic minor for example, or Lydian for example. But Dorian is a great starting point if you're familiar with the minor pentatonic scale, since you just have to add the major 2nd and the major 6th. I made a video play along exercise with the 3 most important Dorian pentatonic scale positions on the neck. You can just play along to this one on Patreon to memorize the notes, the intervals and the shape of each scale. The 4th really helpful and quite easy trick is that you can find amazing sounding arpeggio shapes even in the most simple scales. I think it's very important to talk about this, since we often think about arpeggios and scales as those completely different, disconnected things. Scale and arpeggio. But you can also find really awesome arpeggio shapes in simple scales like the minor pentatonic scale for example. This concept especially becomes more interesting when you extend the 2-note per string pentatonic approach to a 3-note per string approach. But instead of playing the full scale like this, up and down, I can look for interesting arpeggio shapes within the scale. This one sounds quite interesting right away, I really like it. With a little bit of finger barring going on right here. So when I combine these 2 shapes and ideas, I get a pretty cool arpeggio lick based on the pentatonic scale. And that sounds really cool and advanced and not really like a classic pentatonic scale lick. But I'm not thinking in any complicated or crazy arpeggio shapes. I still just visualize the basic A minor pentatonic scale, but I extend it to a 3-note per string approach in my mind. And that way I end up seeing all these cool arpeggio shapes within the scale. Of course I made another practice play along video for this lick as well. But it would be really cool if you focus on finding interesting and unique sounding arpeggio shapes in simple scales in your next practice routine. And today's final and probably most important trick is how you're actually navigating through the scale when you're improvising or playing guitar solos. You often hear players say the pentatonic scale sounds boring or 3-note per string scales sound boring, but it's very often not the fault of the scale or the intervals and notes in it. It's often because of our guilty pleasure of constantly playing the notes ascending or descending. Even if a listener is not a musician, their ears are really smart and they will figure out where your lines are going when they hear the first ascending or descending notes, and they will get bored with it pretty quickly. So one technique trick that has really helped me out with including bigger jumps and bigger intervals in my guitar solos is working with hybrid picking. So just using my pick as I usually do, but I'm also using my middle finger to pluck the strings, and that way I can skip a couple of strings easily. So with licks like this, I can play really big intervals and I can always skip a string in between. And you get really unique and advanced sounding licks this way. And by putting more space in between the notes, so by increasing the size of the intervals that you're playing, you can make something as simple as the minor pentatonic scale sound really advanced and cool. And here's how you can start practicing the hybrid picking approach with those big interval jumps within the scale. I really hope that those 5 tricks will spice up your next guitar solo. Make sure to download your practice files on Patreon right now to start working on this. Your random German word for today is Baum. That means tree, as in Christmas tree. As always, make sure to comment that one below to confuse everybody who's not watching these videos until the end. And I recommend checking out this video next as a follow-up lesson. So have fun shredding. I will see you again in the next video. Bye bye.